There is a meaningful difference between a person who cannot face the crowd and a person who has simply decided the crowd isn't worth the cost. One is avoidance. The other is a choice, and choices reveal character in ways that avoidance never can. We've spent so long pathologizing the person who stays home that we miss something important, what it actually says about someone when they know, clearly and without guilt, what restores them. Society calls them boring. Science calls them something else entirely. Picture a Friday night. Your phone buzzes. Someone is asking what you're doing tonight. A bar, a party, a thing. You read it. You consider it. And what you feel isn't dread exactly, it's more like a quiet calculation. Getting ready, the driving, the noise that never quite turns off. The version of yourself you'd have to perform for 4 hours. And then you look around at where you already are, the lamp on, the quiet, the particular stillness of a space that belongs entirely to you. And you put the phone down, not from fear, from preference. That moment, that choice, is what this is about. Here's the neuroscience behind why that calculation even happens. Psychologists call it optimal arousal theory. Every human nervous system has a threshold, a point where stimulation tips from energizing to overwhelming. For extroverts, that threshold is high. They need the noise, the movement, the social density to feel fully alive. The crowd charges them. But for people who prefer stillness, the nervous system runs differently. Every social interaction, even a genuinely enjoyable one, slowly draws down a resource that only quiet can replenish. Home isn't just comfortable for these people, it's the only charger that actually works. This isn't introversion as a personality flaw. It's neurobiology as a fact. The person who chooses Friday night isn't broken, they're operating in alignment with what their brain actually needs. But there's a second layer beyond the battery, and it's one that rarely gets discussed honestly. When you're out in the world is running the variables. Loud strangers you didn't invite. Last-minute changes to plans you'd already mentally prepared for. Small talk with people who ask how you are and don't wait for the answer. Every unpredictable element requires a small adjustment, a micro-expenditure of mental energy that accumulates over the course of an evening into something that feels like exhaustion, but is actually something more specific. The cost of operating in an environment you can't control. At home, you control the lighting, you control the noise, you control the temperature, the pace, the topic of conversation, and whether there's a topic of conversation at all. For people with anxiety or high sensitivity, that control isn't a preference, it's survival. The home isn't a retreat from the world, it's an environment finally calibrated to the actual requirements of their nervous system. And there's a dividend to all that stillness that the productivity-obsessed world consistently underestimates. Studies show that people who choose solitude tend to score higher on measures of creativity, introspection, and complex problem-solving. This isn't coincidence, there's a mechanism. When you're not managing the social environment, not monitoring facial expressions, not performing the subtle choreography of group interaction, your brain is free to do something it rarely gets to do in a crowd. Think. Not the surface-level thinking that happens between conversations. The deeper kind, the kind that happens in a quiet corner with a book, or during a thought spiral at 2 a.m. that somehow leads somewhere useful. The best ideas were rarely born in a crowded bar. They were born in the particular silence of a mind left alone long enough to follow a thought to the end. If this is landing for you, if you're recognizing something in your own Friday nights or canceled plans that feels more like wisdom than weakness, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find this conversation. And if you want to keep exploring the psychology behind how people are wired, subscribe. This is exactly what we do here. Now here is where this has to get honest, because not everyone who stays home is doing it from a place of strength. For some people, home becomes not just a refuge, but a cage. Social anxiety that tightens its grip the longer you go without testing it. Depression that whispers, "What's the point?" in a voice that sounds uncomfortably like reason. Past experiences, embarrassments, rejections, moments where the social world proved itself genuinely unsafe, that make the couch feel not like a choice, but like the only option that still makes sense. There is a difference, and it matters. Staying home because it fills you up, is peace. Staying home because leaving feels too heavy is something else. And only you know, honestly, which one is actually true for you. The question is worth sitting with. Do you choose the quiet, or does the quiet choose you because the alternative has become too frightening? And if you're watching this right now, you probably recognize something strange about what you just read. You see yourself in it, but part of you still feels like it shouldn't be about you. Both deserve compassion, but only one of them benefits from the validation this video is offering. For the people who genuinely choose it, the ones who turn down invitations without guilt, who feel more themselves in the stillness than they ever do in the noise. There's a name for what they experience that most people don't know about. Psychologists call it low stimulation preference. It describes people who don't require the world to entertain them because their inner world is rich enough. They find something real in the small rituals. The morning coffee made exactly the way they like it. The favorite spot on the couch, worn soft from use. The way the light changes in a familiar room at the end of the day. These aren't consolation prizes for people who couldn't get out. These are the actual textures of a life that has been arranged, consciously, around what matters. And here's what the culture consistently gets wrong about these people. We've been sold the idea that a good life is a visible life, that the parties and the pictures and the places you've been are the evidence that you're living. But that framework only makes sense if you need the external world to tell you who you are. People who choose home over going out have typically resolved a question that most people are still asking. They know what they find meaningful, and they're not waiting for an invitation list to confirm it. The person who can sit in their own company on a Saturday night without fidgeting, without reaching for distraction, without feeling the pull of somewhere else, that person has something. A relationship with themselves that most people would quietly trade a lot to have. The paradox at the center of this is that the people most accused of being antisocial are often the most genuinely connected to their own values, their own rhythms, their own sense of what a day well spent actually means. They're not wired for noise, they're wired for depth, not for performance, for peace. And that isn't the consolation prize. That's the thing everyone else is chasing. Knowing what restores you, and choosing it without apology, without explanation, in a world that keeps asking why you're not somewhere else that is not smallness. That is one of the clearest forms of self-knowledge there is. Is there a specific moment when you realized that staying in wasn't something you needed to apologize for? Leave it in the comments. You might find you're describing something a lot of people recognize but nobody ever said out loud. Thank you for watching.